Government agencies across the world are under constant pressure to improve performance and streamline operations. The IBM Center for the Business of Government helps public sector executives and managers improve the operation and management of government with insights, conversations, information, and action, always connecting research to practice. The center has commissioned more than 400 reports written by leading researchers from the academic and nonprofit communities. Research that is practical, actionable, insightful, and helps government executives respond more effectively to mission and management priorities, addressing real-world problems, and improving government performance and effectiveness. Each week, the Center's The Business of Government Hour, an interview program with government executives and thought leaders who are changing the way government does business. Guests talk about the work they do and the missions they lead, airing more than 500 interviews, providing them a channel to educate and inform. The Center, through its magazine and other online resources, features conversations with government executives who are making a difference and provides original insight on public management challenges facing them today. The Center collaborates with stakeholders at the intersection of government, technology, and leadership, convening conversations aimed at improving government management and its effectiveness at the federal, state, local, and international levels. To learn more and access all center resources, visit businessofgovernment.org.
And that's our center. Good morning. I'm Dan Chenok. I'm the Executive Director of the IBM Center for the Business of Government, and I'm going to sit down so that the people on the Zoom can see. Ruth, can we confirm? This is a hybrid event. This is our first large hybrid event, so you're making history by joining us today. And the people on the Zoom can hear and see us fine, correct? All right. Well, welcome, everybody. Welcome to you in the room. Welcome to you on the Zoom. We are here to have a terrific discussion about a very important issue around extending pathways to homeownership among historically Black colleges and universities and their students, and how to create opportunities to increase homeownership in this population. You saw a note about our center. We work with partner organizations. We have been just thrilled to partner with organizations today, and I'll get to that in a moment. We're going to hear, and you have, for those of you that are in the room, you have a handout. For those of you that are on the Zoom, you'll see some screens. So just let me give you a little bit of a layout of the morning. First, we're going to do some remarks from our distinguished guests that have joined me on the podium here. I'll introduce them before they speak. Then we will do a panel with DeAndra Cullen. We'll moderate, and our panelists will join us. We'll do a quick scene change at that point, and we'll move over to their seats, and they'll come up to the table. After the panel, we'll take a quick break. We'll do a little small scene change. And then it's a working session from about 11:15 to about maybe 10 to 12, where you all will help us create and work with our partners at HUD, Ginnie Mae, Freddie Mac, Uncommon Impact Studios, and all of us as a community will help create opportunities and identify pathways going forward. You also see in your handout and on the Zoom another page with a QR code. This is the code that if you have a cell phone, which I think most people in the world do now, you can scan the QR code, and it will lead to a polling exercise that we will be doing in our workshop, our design thinking workshop, which will happen after the break. So at some point between now and the end of the workshop, just take your phone out and give it a quick scan. And then the last slide for you in the room, in the handout, and the last slide on the screen is the actual design thinking session that you should have received in an email last night from Ruth Gordon in my office. So that'll be the morning. As I mentioned, we've been working as a planning team to make this event happen today, and I want to acknowledge and thank just our tremendous partners in government and industry. Andre Jones from HUD. Andre, where are you? There you are. Phenomenal. Stacy Wisnoff from Freddie Mac. Stacy, there's Stacy. Karen Shakur from Uncommon Impact. I'm not sure if Karen's in the room, but she's been a critical part of the team representing Gene. And then from our office, Ruth Gordon, who is the genius behind everything that's happening today. Ruth is the miracle worker. And then Karen Hendricks from IBM will lead the design thinking session with Stacy. A couple of housekeeping notes. The Wi-Fi is just Hamilton Square. It's free. There's no password needed. You just log on and then there's a screen that comes on. You just have to accept the terms. Restrooms, in case you missed them, are just at the door to your right. Since this is a hybrid event and we're working live in real time between the room and the videos, we're just going to make sure, like if we get a note that, oh, the video's down, we'll just kind of take a quick break. We don't expect that to happen, but you never know. It's live TV, so to speak. And we've all seen it even on the news when people, feed goes out and from their home and stuff. So we'll just kind of roll with it, and we look forward to a fantastic active discussion in the room and from the Zoom. We do have a person who will be monitoring a chat. I think that's Tyra, right? No, it's Riley, who will be monitoring the chat for comments from the Zoom group. And when we're in session, either Q&A or in the design thinking, Riley's going to essentially represent the people in the Zoom. So when somebody has a comment in the chat, and people on the Zoom, please use the chat to ask questions or comments at any point. Riley will raise her hand. And we have a comment or a question from the chat, and then whoever is leading at that point, whether it's DeAndra in the Q&A or Karen and Stacy in the design thinking session, they'll call on them, just to give you kind of a sense of how that will work. Okay, any questions about housekeeping, logistics, or anything else? All right, well, I am now extremely honored to introduce our first speaker, Gene Dibble. Gene is the Chief Impact Officer for Uncommon Impact and the co-founder of Uncommon Impact Ventures. Gene serves on multiple boards. He's a leader in the housing finance space in many different ways. We are very fortunate to have worked with Gene and his team over the last several months to make this happen, and we're very excited to hear from Gene, who will both talk himself and then introduce a special guest.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you again, and welcome everyone. It's an extreme pleasure for us to be part of this critically important summit. Our company, Uncommon Impact Studio, is a venture builder and impact investor with a focus on accelerating growth in organizations. At Uncommon, our mission is derived from the quote of Booker T. Washington, who said, "Excellence is to do a common thing in an uncommon way." And that uncommon way allows us to challenge the status quo at every juncture. I am here today to reinforce our commitment to actively narrowing the wealth gap with a specific focus on how we can unlock creative pathways to accelerate the rate of home ownership throughout Black and Brown communities. We have joined forces with a number of incredibly talented people who have come together in a highly collaborative initiative to explore and implement how we can create actionable and sustainable change across the full U.S. housing stock with an estimated worth of $43.4 trillion. Please note the record housing gain in 2021 of $6.9 trillion nearly doubled the previous largest annual gain of $3.7 trillion in 2005. So the opportunity is now, and the time for our levels of participation to grow exponentially. I am honored to and pleased to share a statement from Director Sandra Thompson, who oversees the $7 trillion federal housing.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Sandra Thompson. I'm the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and I'm honored to welcome you to this important event. I want to start by thanking IBM for bringing us together today. I also need to thank the speakers, the presenters, and thought leaders from the public and private sectors for your participation. Looking at the list of attendees, I can promise the students in the audience that this will be an extremely productive and successful event. We're here today to help HBCU students build wealth through the purchase of a first home. That's an obvious first step towards closing a persistent homeownership gap, but it also moves us closer to eliminating the equally persistent wealth gap, both of which have plagued our country for generations. Here at FHFA, one of the things we've done to address this problem is to ask Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae to create equitable housing plans that contain specific, quantifiable steps to identify and address the barriers that communities of color face when getting a mortgage. Unfortunately, there's no single policy to close these gaps or to knock down these barriers, but these ambitious plans represent a commitment to safe and sustainable approaches that will meaningfully address racial and ethnic disparities in both homeownership and wealth. So as we kick off this event, I thank all of you for your time, and I know that in the face of this group's efforts and determination, nothing is insurmountable. Lastly, I want to tell you just how deep and personal my commitment is to our vitally important HBCUs. They're in my blood. My mother went to Tennessee State University, my brother and I went to Howard, and my sons went to Florida A&M and Clark Atlantic University. So believe me when I say, I know how special and how needed these schools are. Thank you again and have a great discussion today.
Okay, I think we are back online. Can we just get a confirmation, Leif, that we can be heard in the room? Okay, Gene, you want to finish up?
Yeah, well, that was it. I just wanted to introduce Director Thompson and I think she did a wonderful job, and actually it has expressed her commitment, as she stated. She's HBCU through and through. So this is an exciting initiative. She oversees so many organizations that are focused on this same issue that we're here today to discuss. So we've got a wide open audience, and let's make it happen.
Thank you, Gene. I am now honored to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Pamela Jolly. Dr. Jolly is the founder and CEO of Torch Enterprises, a strategic investment firm that helps many different populations, women and minority businesses in the field of education, real estate, and many other ventures that she will talk about more. She's the author of numerous books, has spoken nationally at hundreds of events, so we're very fortunate to have her with us this morning. I also noted that that Dr. Jolly was a key player in the post-Katrina recovery in New Orleans, where she led work in Mississippi. So we're very fortunate that she's here today to talk with us about these important topics. Dr. Jolly.
Thank you. I'm gonna pick up my voice. So grateful to be here. Torch stands for passing the torch from one generation to the next to build legacy wealth via increased ownership and equity. I launched the company 20 years ago because of something that really troubled me. And what troubled me was the low levels of ownership and the low levels of equity in the community that I cared about most, which was ours. And so for the last 20 years, I've been data-driven. I've built relationships across this country. My dissertation was the convergence of faith and finance in the African-American community. I spent 9 years interviewing thousands of African Americans about their relationship with money, faith, finance, and legacy. And the patterns, when we connected it with our American history, our business history, and the realities of the gaps we face, but also the voids that we have in terms of pursuing wealth, became a narrow road, which I've written several books about. My job, and I take my job seriously because Stacy, my dear friend, I'm so grateful to Gene and Stacy for being able to be here, is to set the tone. And so, as Dan said, I wrote the strategic assessment to rebuild New Orleans post-Katrina. And I underwrote over $200 million in Mississippi post-Katrina, which was a national disaster. So think about that. It was a disaster that hit everyone, but it taught very valuable lessons about wealth creation in the African American community. In my research, what I found is it takes 3 generations to build legacy wealth and only 1 generation to lose it. But when 4 generations come together, the wealth wheel begins to turn. And that's where we are right now. And that's what we see in this room. We see 4 generations of strategies converging together to reimagine a pathway towards homeownership. Now, reimagining means reinterpreting. And from my perspective, it's expanding the road to include what is our newest batch of wealth builders. The wealth window for African Americans is approximately 40 years. Right now, it starts around 34. Why it's so important that you're in this room today is that we stand to build a pipeline that will allow our newest batch of wealth builders to begin wealth building a decade early, to build 50 years through ownership. In my interviews, I interviewed so many different amazing people. One of them was Skip Gates. Skip Gates said to me that African Americans are the same number of generations away from slavery. Where we differ is the number of generations away from ownership. Ownership cuts the shackle. Now, when we start talking about wealth in the African American community, it often is preceded by the discussion about a gap. For the last 15 to 20 years, we've been talking about a wealth gap. We talk about poverty and underrepresented minority communities. But the reality is that poverty is a number that we can look at according to your zip code. We can figure that out. What I have found in my research is what we all struggle with, whether you're below the poverty line or above the poverty line, is financial oppression, which is not understanding your choices. Wealth is a choice. And what we're doing here today is designing a pathway so that our HBCU graduates can choose wealth earlier in a proven pathway that is education, preparation, and empowerment. Now, I'm a proud graduate of Hampton University. I also sit on the board of trustees for Benton College. I know the power of what HBCUs have done and will do. We are expanding their reach deeper into the realities of future generations to come. We've all read the reports. We know what HBCUs have done and are capable of continuing to do. The way forward is back through when we really think about providing these solutions. Where we are today, it's new for us in this room. This journey is not new. When we think about 3 generations post-emancipation, it was ancestors of enslaved Africans who pulled capital together to fund 249 colleges and universities. Education was the return on investment. We've got to expand the curriculum to include wealth creation so that the pipeline of wealth builders can improve. Oftentimes we hear, I don't believe in deficits. I sit on the board of BB, we asset frame. When you talk about the deficits of a group of people, you disenfranchise them. When you look at them as assets, you empower them. Our homeownership rate has not changed, but when you disaggregate the data, the wealthiest population of the African American community are our elders. Many of them are owners, yet very few of them have wills. So that asset will not pass on. So we've got to build a new pipeline so that we can see an increase in ownership and equity. Now, if you make a lot of income, you can get rich. But if you want to build wealth, you have to have ownership that leads to increasing levels of equity. And that's what we're doing here. The last note I want to share is this. How many people know Reverend Dr. Samuel Hewitt Proctor? Does anyone know him? How many people know Sergeant Schreiber? Excellent. So Sergeant Schreiber was appointed by President Johnson. And literally he was the architect for the War of Poverty. Now, wealth is a group process. So he partnered with Samuel D. Wood Proctor. Now, Samuel D. Wood Proctor had been the head of North Carolina A&T and one other HBCU that I can't remember right now, but 2. And he came together and he helped Samuel and Mr. Schreiber. They pulled capital together to fund the elevation of the curriculum for HBCUs. The way forward is back through. What I see us doing here today is to further expand the curriculum, to elevate the standard, to include wealth creation as a part of basic learning so that it becomes a part of their journey. So my prayer for you today is this: walk away with clarity about the role you play in this very important piece. Understand it takes a collective capital stack of federal, public, private, and personal capital to make these things work. Recognize that many of us, when the decision for homeownership to become standard in America, we weren't in the room where it happened. We are in the room where it happens now. Let's take full advantage of the position that we're in, walk away with some low-hanging fruit that will build momentum, build new relationships in this room, and make a commitment to see this all the way through. Let's not spark it. Let's create a flame, goes into a torch that lights a path, homeownership that can pass on for generations. So grateful to be here. Look forward to what the future brings. I'm so glad to be in this room.
Thank you, Dr. Jolly, for those inspiring words that will key, I'm sure, a terrific discussion later with some very productive ideas to reach some of the goals that you have articulated. Next, and our last speaker in the first panel, I'd like to introduce DeAndra Cullen. DeAndra is the Deputy Assistant Secretary in HUD's Office of Policy, Legislative Initiatives, and Outreach. DeAndra came to that role having been the Director of Education and Outreach at the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, many of us know of FAO. DeAndra will speak for a few moments about some of the executive orders that we included in the invitation that frame the discussion. And then after she's done with her own remarks, she will then give us the signal. We will then switch with our esteemed panel who will join the stage at that time. DeAndra, over to you.
Absolutely, thank you. That's a hard one to follow. I'm not sure if I can follow Dr. Jolly with what I have to say. Next time we have to talk about this a little bit better so we can become better timing. Good morning, everyone. Again, I am DeAndra Cullen, and I'm a proud graduate of North Carolina A&T State University. Slightly embarrassed that I didn't know about this Proctor, but I'll learn about that after this panel discussion. I'm really excited about this thought-provoking panel discussion today on how we as a collective might reimagine a new innovative pathway to home ownership for our HBCU students. We are guided today in this discussion by the White House Initiative on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity through historically Black colleges and universities, or for our lawyers in the House, Executive Order 14041. The White House Initiative on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity for Black Americans. That's Executive Order 14050. There's Transforming Federal Customer Experience and Service Delivery to Rebuild Trust in Government, or Executive Order 14058. And then we have the Interagency Statement on Special Credit Purpose Programs under the Equity Credit Opportunity Act. A lot of different guidance that we can use in this discussion today. The question I want to frame for all of you in this ongoing conversation is how we might create a better service delivery model to support the people we serve. Home ownership, as you've heard already this morning, is the primary way American families build wealth and pass it on for next generation. But while the United States is known worldwide as a land of great opportunity, I have to tell you that opportunities for home ownership have been deeply and unequal in this country for a long, long time. Because of systemic discrimination in this nation's housing and credit markets, including the federal government itself, home ownership rates are much lower for African Americans and other people of color than their white counterparts. This is true in the 1960s before the Fair Housing Act, which my office administers, became law. And it's even truer today. The Black-white home ownership gap, as Dr. Jolly mentioned earlier, is wider today than it was in 1968 when the Fair Housing Act was followed. I'm gonna let you chew on that for just a second. The white-Black home ownership gap is wider today than it was in 1968 in the height of the civil rights movement. Today. So that's why we're all here. Every American in this country deserves an equal opportunity to become a homeowner, accumulate wealth, and pass it to their children and to their heirs. To accomplish this, the Department of Housing and Urban Development and its Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity are committed to working to eliminate the home ownership gap, which is one of the major inequities in the United States today. Among other things, HUD will vigorously enforce the Fair Housing Act and other civil rights laws to combat housing discrimination, home mortgage lending, and appraisal. So discrimination in both of those areas. But bridging the racial and ethnic homeownership gap requires more than combating current and future discrimination. Lenders and the government alike must find creative ways to advance equity by increasing home ownership opportunities for the underserved communities and their populations. It is not enough to remove the barriers to credit going further. We must also work to remedy past injustices by targeting communities and populations that were and continue to be deeply harmed by discrimination in this country. If we do not work proactively, long-standing inequities will continue to persist in communities throughout the United States. Because narrowing the home ownership gap is an effective way to bridge inequities that exist today, we at HUD are encouraging lenders to take important steps designed to remedy continuing legacy of past discrimination. I am joined today by key stakeholders whose resources, programs, and on-the-ground experiences, those trusted voices in the community, can help us reimagine what this pathway to home ownership for HBCU students might look like. Whether existing programs and resources like HUD's Housing Choice Home Ownership Voucher Program are leveraged, or new ones like the Interagency Statement on Special Purpose Credit Programs that I mentioned earlier. The end goal of this initiative is to create new opportunities that allow HBCU students to build wealth through home ownership. While we recognize that many segments of the Black and Brown communities also need increased access to home ownership, we want to kick off this panel discussion of potential initiatives focused on home ownership opportunities, or initiatives focused on these opportunities for HBCU student populations. It is our expectation that what comes out of this pilot initiative can be expanded to increase opportunities for other segments of the Black community. This is why we are all here today, because we get it. We get what the issues are, and we're here committed to resolving them. We look forward to collaborating with these experts. I know I'm looking forward to it, as they share their valuable insights on how we might together further this effort. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm looking and I'm ready. I'm ready to talk to this panel of experts. I'm looking at them right now in front of me, so I can't wait to bring them to the table. So I guess we could. Let's go ahead and do a seat check. I want to first thank Jean and Dr. Pamela Draw, because what they said, thank you very much. We're all going to be in touch. Just letting you know. Don't go too far.
Okay, 30 seconds, people on the Zoom, 30 seconds.
Thank you.
All right, DeAndra, everybody's in the frame.
Everybody here.
Everybody can be seen on the Zoom. And it's a go.
You're welcome. Okay, so I think we're all seated and ready to go. All right, awesome. I want to introduce our panel and dive right into their respective roles. Please let me first welcome Alan Williams, Deputy Assistant Secretary, Governmental Affairs at HUD. He's also HUD's HBCU Executive Liaison for Executive Order 14041. There's going to be a quiz on all these executive orders out there, just to let you know. So my first question is to you, Alan. What role does intergovernmental affairs play at HUD?
First of all, thank you for having me here today. As a proud HBCU alum, graduate of Florida A&M, the Florida A&M University. We SWAC champions, or at least the Black college football champions. Jackson State may say they were SWAC champions, but nonetheless, I'm honored to be here, and honored to serve in this role and to be appointed by the president and the secretary to serve as deputy assistant secretary for intergovernmental affairs. And in short, what intergovernmental affairs does, our job is to go out and further the mission of HUD, working with our colleagues across the country. And as I like to tell folks, my job is to further the mission of HUD with all elected officials throughout the country, except for members of Congress. We have another colleague that specifically focuses on Capitol Hill. But my job is to work with mayors to understand what their concerns are. Obviously at HUD, as Secretary Fudge likes to call it, we are the mayor's agency. And whether it's through CDBG, whether it's through CDBG DR when crisis and disasters happen after FEMA comes in, with a long-term solution to helping communities recover. Whether it's looking at what the current crisis that we're in COVID, looking at those ARP funds that have come out, whether it's the CARES Act funding, ARP, home, you name it. Our job is to go out and work with these communities and make sure that they understand how to best utilize these resources. And as Secretary Fudge says, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to address a once in a lifetime crisis. And so these funds that have been appropriated through the various mechanisms that Congress has put forward is really an opportunity for communities to reimagine and rethink how they're going to develop their communities. And so we work with them every day. We block and tackle on some of the issues that aren't so favorable. Sometimes, as you mentioned earlier, DeAndra, about the work that our Office of FHEO does. Our job is also to make sure that our communities are not so much held accountable, but understand the ramifications of some of their the policies that they enact that don't bring about diversity in housing, don't bring about diversity in home ownership. That's why one of the first things that the Secretary did was to address the appraisal bias through the PAVE task force. And so that looked at the inequities in appraisal and the appraisal bias that takes place in our communities. And she was a victim of it herself back in Cleveland. And then we also looked at AFFH, which is affirmatively furthering fair housing. And that's something that we're still in the process of doing. It's important that we kind of go back and undo some of the things that the previous administration did to make sure that, down the road, whether it's not just now, but years down the road, that we are make sure that folks are moving into those homes, that they're forever homes in the community that they choose, not the community that chooses them. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at. I look at the TV show that came out probably during COVID, when the family was moving into, I think it was East Compton by Jordan Peele. And so, that community didn't choose them, right? They chose that community, and that community did everything they could to really get them out of that community. And so it's our hope that we don't have such a horrific situation like that occur anywhere in the United States, even now. But if we're not diligent, if we're not focused, then that could happen. So that's our job. We try to work with those members, those elected officials every day to kind of give them guidance and support to make sure that we can realize this home ownership opportunity for everyone, especially our HBCU students.
Thank you, and thank you for raising those 2 points with affirmatively furthering fair housing change initiative. Those are 2 very critical initiatives that our department is very committed to. Thank you, Alan. I'd like to also introduce Danberry Carmon, Associate Deputy Assistant Secretary. A lot of Deputy Assistant Secretaries up here on the panel, aren't there? Associate Deputy Assistant Secretary, Office of Housing Counseling at HUD. Welcome, Danberry. Oh, no, that's okay. You're welcome. So I have a question for you.
Sure.
What is your role? What is the role of housing counseling and what do you do there?
Okay, so let's start with, well, first off, I'm not a proud graduate of HBCU, but all my siblings are. I have six siblings in North Carolina. But my role as the Associate Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Housing Counseling is to provide a pathway for consumers, especially in the African American, Black community, and other minority communities, a pathway to acknowledgement, to empowerment. So often we see people of color in minority communities swim high, defrauded. And so our goal is to end it, is to provide knowledge, education, and that source for information to get the questions answered when they don't seem, when the information being presented just doesn't seem right. Provide a way where people can get accurate, unbiased information to help them make informed decisions. We talk about wealth building, but we should also talk about wealth keeping as part of it. So much is centered around education. Education is power. And I remember sharing with a regional administrator years ago, we teach our children how to kill at 16, 17 years old in the military, but we teach them nothing about finance, about budgeting, about things that will help them later in life. So let's turn that, let's flip the switch on that. Let's give them what they need at an early age so that they can build wealth, their minds can be expanded to say, I can be a part of this American dream so that it lasts forever and ever, and they can pass it on to their children. We are excited now to talk more about some of the things the Office of Housing Counseling is doing later, but we are immersed. We are dedicated, we are committed to help building wealth in the communities that are communities of color, and not just the Black community, but there's Hispanic. There are other communities that need our help and we're moving to. Well, we have it in the past, but we're ratcheting it up. We are working around the clock, and as you hear from some of the partner agencies that we work with, you'll hear about some of the wonderful things in more detail about what the Office of Housing Counseling is doing. Thank you.
Thank you. So you may not have gone to an HBCU, but you're definitely impacted by HBCUs.
Absolutely. I spent so much time on those campuses from Fayetteville State University, Elizabeth City State University, North Carolina A&T, Shaw.
Rub a little rapper just on.
St. Augustine, I'm sorry, St. Aug. And in fact, during the civil rights marches, we traveled from Little Washington. My mother, my uncle, my aunt, and my cousins. They put us in the back seat, and we marched. They took us to the marches, and we marched with them. And so we knew going back, and we talked about on the way back home from Durham and Raleigh, what happened out there. Absolutely.
That's what I say, you're chicken. Okay, I told you this was going to be a good panel. I was not kidding. Okay, so let me introduce to Danberry's right, Ruth Mark of NACA. Or NACA, I'm not sure, but we'll ask you that in 1 second. Let me just get it out and then we'll go to that. First of all, can you let the audience know what NACA stands for?
So it stands for the Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America. We are a nonprofit homeownership advocacy organization. We're the largest in the country. We're HUD approved. We do over 30% of the housing counseling in the country, and we provide the best mortgage in America.
He's not kidding about that. There's definitely some truth to that. But what he's not telling you, you are the founder of NAC, is that correct?
Yes, I started NACA 37 years ago.
Can we just get back? So tell us a little bit more about NAC, like what you do and how you serve the community that you're in.
So let me go through the nuts and bolts. So we have an attitude that if you build it, people will come.
Yes.
So what we have is we have the best mortgage in America. Factually, it's the best mortgage in America because we are a regulated, not just housing counseling agency, we're a nonprofit mortgage broker agency. So we are regulated by every state. So sometimes when you say it's the best mortgage in America, the regulators say, well, how can that be true? And then we say, do your homework. No down payment. There's no down payment. There's no closing costs. Lender eats all the closing costs. There's no mortgage insurance because mortgage insurance is a scam. All you're doing is you're funding the lenders out there to do that. No mortgage insurance, and it's always at a below market fixed rate. Today's rate for a 30-year mortgage is 4.625. For a 15-year, it's 3.75. So it's the best mortgage in America, but we don't consider one's credit score. We do character-based lending. So the secret sauce is the underwriting. So in the audience, we have Dante Jackson. He is a lead underwriter. He oversees the underwriter. So it's character-based lending. But this mortgage, it sounds extraordinary, but what built the white suburbs after World War II? It was the no down payment VA mortgage. So why not take that same concept because of the white suburbs, because as we know, people of color could not use that mortgage. So now let's take that same idea and build the minority communities and provide wealth for people of color. But the fact of the matter is, so it sounds too good to be true. So what is the reality? Well, with over 70,000 mortgages, of which 94% are people of color homeowner, a foreclosure rate of 0.00012 over more than 20 years, even during the mortgage crisis. So we have demonstrated that if you do it the right way, it works. But I started NACA 37 years ago. I can only say it was a success with what we're doing. We do these massive events. So we did one in Miami. Over 15,000 people came about 6 weeks ago. Over 15,000 people came over 4 days to get the comprehensive counseling and get access to our best in America mortgage. 2 weeks ago, we did one in New York City. Over 20,000 people came. And it was at the Resorts Casino in Queens. There was no advertising, no outreach. It was word of mouth. And that's it. So when people say they don't know about NACA, I say the drumbeat in the minority community is if you want affordable home ownership, you come to NACA. And we have $20 billion of this one mortgage fund. $15 billion of it is from Bank of America. So we give them a lot of credit. They've been our partners since 1996. But the one thing, one of the things that you said, DeAndra, is service delivery model. And that's the key, because you can have the best mortgage in America. You can have that, character-based underwriting, where you look at people's individual circumstances, never using their credit score, always looking at payments. For example, if someone has a late medical payment, that's not a reflection of whether they're ready for home ownership. That just says we have a dysfunctional, unaffordable healthcare system in this country. But you have to have a service delivery model where you can deal with lots of people, because there's a lot of good programs out there, but they're small, they're boutique, they're good, but they're small. You have to be able to do this on scale. And that's what we built. So behind the scenes, we have state-of-the-art CMS system where you get a lot of people through, but you put the responsibility on the home buyer. And then you work with them on the financial management. So we've got this model, but now let's talk about HBCUs, if like where that piece fits in. It's really crucial because, as I said, 94% of our home buyers are people of color. 95% of our staff are people of color. And we're in all 50 states. So we're really excited about working with HUD help fund part of it, small part, but part of it, but it's a step in the right direction on that. So we appreciate that. But, so what we worked with, and the key person was Dr. Lucas. He is the president of Virginia Union University. So he worked with us and he put together a group of 11 HBCU presidents to sign an MOU. So let me lay out what that MOU does. It's not just for the students, it's for the alumni and it's for the employees of HBCUs and for the communities where they're based. So yes, it's the housing counseling. Yes, it's training people to be housing counselors. Yes, it's to provide home ownership. Yes, it's to be able to provide job opportunities. Because, one of the things is you need people of color to be appraisers. You need people of color to be in those positions within the lending and the real estate community. Because let's be clear, there's more fraud and abuse in the real estate mortgage industry than any other industry. Everybody's trying to rip you off. So we need to make sure we have trusted people in all the aspects of that industry. And then it's to talk about development. And so what they came back with is they said, we want a NACA office in each one of our HBCU. So the 11 that we're working with, and we're working with 11, and that's just the beginning. So it's Virginia Union University, Shaw, Johnson C. Smith, gotta read them all. Benedict University, Lander Smith, Wiley College, Edward Waters University, Wilberforce University, Allen University, Grace Baptist Organization, Pine Grove AME, and Livingston. And that's just the beginning. So the idea is not just to work with one, but to set up a system, as you're saying, where you can do it on scale so they can work together. So, and it's not just that. And now we're talking about housing choice vouchers. Well, one of the programs that should work is using a housing choice voucher to home ownership. Problem is it hasn't worked in the past because it makes no sense, because the housing choice voucher, if you want to use it for home ownership, it will only 20-year or more mortgage. Well, most of the mortgages are for 30 years and they'll only pay for 15 years. So why should someone give up their housing choice voucher when they have a financial cliff at 15 years because they no longer have it anymore? That's a HUD reg. So they're going to lose their home after 15 years. So what does NACA do? We put together what we call the HOT PHA, Home Ownership Through Public Housing Assistance. We take a 30-year mortgage, we amortize it over 15 years. So at the end of 15 years, that person who has a housing choice voucher, they have no mortgage. They own it free and clear. And we need to work with HUD to make sure that they, eliminate some of the other roadblocks to do this on scale. So hopefully HUD will be into this. We haven't seen that kind of response that we need from you guys. So we hope that that's going to happen on that, because we have a bit of an attitude that we don't take no for an answer, and with over 3 million members, and we do require people to participate in whatever way they feel comfortable. Yes, a lot of people want to do the protest with us and, take on the CEOs and go to their homes and hold them personally accountable in a non-violent way, but in whatever way people feel comfortable to really participate with. So I'm going to, end it there. And I can answer any other questions, but you know, we have more events going. We just finished New York City, as I said. We do Houston at the beginning of August. We're going to be in Baltimore at the beginning of September. We're going to be in Atlanta, and we're going around the country because these massive events. And it's great that Stacy was there, that Jean was there, because you see just massive numbers of people coming together as a group saying, look, I look around that audience, there's thousands of people here right now looking just like me, getting success, being able to be a homeowner. So we want to be able to do this on scale and work with the various partners out there to make not that to be the exception to the rule, but have it as a standard for affordable home ownership, particularly for people of color, and working with the HBCUs, because that's the future. Thank you.
I'd just like to go on record in saying that what Bruce and NACA is doing is he is a national treasure. And the work that they're doing and the impact that they have is off the charts. And our opportunity from this setting is to meet with every agency that touches housing and finance and let them understand the model that they created and see how we can work with these agencies to be able to scale and accelerate the growth of what they're doing. Because it's remarkable. So thank you, Bruce.
Steve, thank you.
Absolutely. And when I mentioned.
And it's the staff. I mean, I gotta say, I mean, you
I'm
know,
15.
yeah, it's unbelievable staff who've been with NAC for many, many years, who work, I mean, you know, I mean, and I gotta say one thing. When you go to the events, they start at 8 o'clock in the morning. We don't end till 1 or 2 in the morning. We don't turn anybody away. And then they come back, people come back and start again at 7:30 to be there to do that. So it's just, people work unbelievably hard, and it's a mission. It's not a job. It's much more than a job. But
And I also point out to Bruce that the financial literacy that they're doing in this process. I mean, he had us stand behind their underwriters and their counselors and watch the process unveil and actually ask the applicants questions. The financial literacy that's going on here, to your point about the need for this, it's right there. It's being done. I've never seen it done at this scale anywhere in the country.
No. Absolutely. And when I mentioned these trusted voices, I mean, you've got one right here, a trusted voice that you definitely understands what the needs are, the challenges, which I like to say opportunities, not challenges. So I have a positive spin. We talked about positive and negative talk. So opportunities. So thank you, Bruce, for all that you're doing. You and your team are doing to help people realize the opportunity of homeownership. Now, without further ado, and it's always, I understand when I'm behind somebody who's a dynamic figure is always tough, but you're gonna have another dynamic person, and that is Milan Griffin of HomeFree-USA. Milan, tell us a little bit about HomeFree-USA, if you would.
Yes, so thank you for having me. HomeFree-USA, we are a nonprofit housing counseling organization. My parents actually started HomeFree-USA 27 years ago. Jim Griffin, my father, he had the first African-American home mortgage servicing company in the country. And back in the day, and even then, he was seeing high rates of default amongst African-Americans and people of color in general. And so him and my mother got together and started HomeFree-USA. And over the years, we have really expanded. We have 5 different programs that really create and help to build a foundation to close the racial wealth gap. As we already know, the racial wealth gap took a long time to create, was very intentional within its creation, and will take a long time to undo, hopefully not as long as it took to create them. And so with that in mind, we have 5 programs that are really created to help to build a foundation, close the racial wealth gap. And one is our staple, it's the heart of HomeFree-USA, and that's our housing counseling. And with our housing counseling, we focus on home buyers, really helping to create a pathway through one-on-one guidance and group education to guide renters to home ownership. And so we do that through step one of counseling, group education. We have a 96% approval rate amongst our mortgage lending partners. We have about 10 lending partners, and we have a 0% foreclosure rate amongst those who have participated in our guidance and our housing counseling. Secondarily, we have our business development arm, which is our affiliate network. HomeFree-USA is a HUD intermediary. We appreciate the partnership with HUD. And so we're one of 19 HUD intermediaries. We like to call our intermediary network the new America, or really it's the old America that nobody labels it as such, which is, communities of color all across the country coming together to really, again, close the racial wealth gap and really helping to move communities up through housing counseling. And so, but also through that affiliate network, we provide small business development and growth, because we also understand that for these nonprofits that are out here doing the work, they also need capacity building. So we do provide funding and training to those affiliates. We have our government services program, as you all know, that money is distributed through Congress to many state governments, but much of that money is returned that is really designated for distressed renters and homeowners. And so we work with governments, specifically right now in Cobb County, right outside of Atlanta, as well as the state of Maryland, to basically be a marketing arm to help to market and promote the funds that are available to the community, but also to work with community on behalf of the government to qualify people for these funds. This helps to ensure that, the money hits the ground, the money really gets in the hands of people who need it most, and we can really work on specifically with our homeowners, helping them to sustain their homes. We have our property development arm. We do affordable development. We're doing a lot in South Florida, but our attention is really focused on Baltimore. We have a new initiative called Baltimore on the Rise, really working with Baltimore city government and doing development work, mainly focused in the Politan, Pigtown, West Baltimore area, right around the University of Maryland Biopark, and really redeveloping those homes, making them into high quality affordable homes, putting them back on the market. And lastly, we have hopefully I went through all the programs, we have our Center for Financial Advancement, and that is our HBCU program. And with this HBCU program, we started this about 5 years ago. We started at Fisk University. Since then, we have 10 different schools that we work with. And really with this HBCU initiative, and we're growing by next year, start of next school year, we'll have about 15. And really with the HBCU initiative, with the Center for Financial Advancement, we're doing a couple of things through this initiative. One, we partner with mortgage lenders to help them to recruit students from HBCUs. As you know, if you're in the mortgage business, most people kind of like trip and fall and wind up in this business, not realizing it's a very lucrative business. And as a result, just like we see with the homeownership gap, we also see a big gap in terms of race and gender and age related to the mortgage industry. And so the goal of CFA is to be a recruitment arm to help to prepare on top of the already great preparation that HBCU students have, to really help to kind of add another layer of cherry to the already well-prepared cake, if you will, by way of providing professional development, helping to connect the students to careers in the mortgage industry, exposing them to careers in the mortgage industry, and then working with our partners, our lending partners, to help those students to gain internship. So we work with everyone from Rocket Mortgage to Wells Fargo, Bank of America, or even the Mortgage Bankers Association. And for many of these entities, they never even had an internship program. And so not only are they working with us to recruit the students, but we're also working with them to design internship programs and to also help these entities improve their retention. Because you can get there, but if you're the last one hired, first fired, that's a whole other story. So with the CFA program, our focus is on diversifying the mortgage industry by way of intentional professional development and recruitment. Our intention and our goal and our work with the HBCUs is also to build homeownership. And so through the information we're providing about professional development, we also work to develop the students' financial awareness and really help to build homeowners and homeownership as another alternative to graduate school. We're not saying you should go to graduate school, you do whatever you want to, but also think about homeownership as something you do immediately after college graduation. And so we have, with that success, we have students who have come out and bought their homes at 22, 23 years old. And also, and probably even just as important than them buying their homes, they're going back to their families saying, hey, Mom, why are we still renting when we could be buying? And so we also are seeing more students coming in and buying with their mothers and their fathers and really transforming that trajectory. So CFA is our baby, if you will, but it's the second part of the newest heart of HomeFree-USA is growing leaps and bounds. And again, through that program, Center for Financial Advancement, we're doing recruitment work, but we're also helping to build a new cadre of homeowners and really seeing the tangible.
Well, how many people here are HBCU students or former HBCU students? Okay, so we've got all of these great products. I just wanted to just kind of do a quick survey so we really can make sure that what you all get out of this, your expectations, that we have this meaningful dialogue, which as you can see, we've already been demonstrating here. So before I open it up to the audience for questions, there's just a few questions I wanted to ask our distinguished guests here on this panel. Danberry, I'm going to come back to you. How might we innovate housing counseling education? Because it seems the theme here is a lot of education that needs to be out in the community for them to understand what products and programs are out there. How might we innovate housing counseling education to reach this generation of future homeowners? How can we do that as they matriculate through college?
That's a very good question. And we can do it in several ways. But before I launch into those ways, let me share some information with you. So what you're seeing is a representation of HUD's Office of Housing Counseling. The two agencies that are represented here today represents a network of approximately 1,500 HUD-approved housing counseling agencies from Anchorage to Miami and in U.S. territories. And so, and they counsel approximately over 1 million clients annually. So we are very much appreciative to the partnership with these agencies. All of them contribute to helping citizens across the nation. And also I want to mention too, that we have a staff of approximately 80 wonderful, great members who oversee this large network, and it's over 3,000 certified housing counselors to make sure that the information is consistent and it's quality information that's disseminated to our clients. So going back to the question, so as you know, in January, the Secretary announced $49 million in grants to the network of housing counseling agencies. Of that $49 million, $3 million was set aside for HBCU initiatives, of which HomeFree and NARC are participating. There were 16 agencies selected who said that we'll take the challenge. We'll go out and we'll build a structure to work with these organizations, HBCUs, MSIs across the nation. And as you heard today, you've heard some of the wonderful things that they're starting to embark on. So we see the vision as reaching out to students early in the game. And it wouldn't be nice if every student and every HBCU, when they walked across the stage to get that diploma, they will also have a certificate of counseling and group sessions and training from one of our great partners here. So that's a wonderful vision to have, because we will know that they're armed and ready to build wealth and to keep it, not only for them, but for their children. So that's one of the visions that we see, that we have here. We think if we reach them early, when they're freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, not when they're in graduate school, but early on, it's just as much as crucial as Calculus 101. to know how to take that calculus and integrate it, not differentiate it, but integrate it into their wealth building. You know, like I did, that's the engineering. But seriously, going back to wage food, but we don't stop there. We don't stop there. We want families and individuals to come back to housing counseling as checkups and making sure that they're on the pathway, that when a disaster, as Dr. Jolly talked about, Katrina, and believe me, Katrina's not the only one, but when the disasters, the wildfires in the West, the pandemic, that they can survive it. That's very important. Or when something comes up, an emergency comes up, and they have to dig into the kitty, that if they might run a little short on their mortgages, or in trouble, maybe a question about it, that they can go to one of our partners and say, listen, we need a checkup, we need to know, or we may need your help to avoid default and foreclosure. That's very important, as Bruce talked about. You don't have to go through a foreclosure. You don't have to live with a default. You can beat it just by seeking help and knowing where to go. So you mentioned what ways. There are so many ways that housing counseling can help over and above, once the $3 million and any other subsequent funding that we receive from Congress, that before this initiative, that the work goes on in spite of any appropriations or anything like that. So that's what's important to us. Maintenance and building upon that, so we don't lose what we built upon.
And if I can add something to what you're saying, Deborah, I just want to, I think we need to take it to a higher level as well as what we talked about, because no one comes to counseling, to a housing counseling agency for counseling. They come to get an outcome, either to save their home or to purchase a home to do it. I've never seen someone say, oh, I just want to come for housing counseling. There's always got to be an outcome that we have out there. And as part of that, what we have to do is we have to improve the housing counseling industry. We should require the counseling out there to be documented counseling. Because if someone comes through and they say what their income is, well, you got to verify that. How much they have in their assets. They got to be able to understand the bank statements, to really document that. It's got to be documented counseling. Stated counseling is a disservice to the clients. And HUD has to force that issue to make it a higher standard. Because if we're going to institutionalize housing counseling and to make it a value added for the lenders out there, it's got to be documented counseling. And that's not being done on scale. The other thing is, when we talk about the HBCUs, we got to talk about the alumni, and we got to talk about the employees who work there. Because if you think about it, yes, it's nice that we're going to do it. It's important that we do the financial education for the students, but they're not going to be someone who's immediately looking to get into the industry. You're building that for the future. But the alumni, that's really the opportunity out there to really to provide that education, and their employees, the staff that works there. And also really important is the community. HBCUs have a really tight connection to the cities and the towns that they're a part of. So you talk about housing development, not just on the properties that they own, but on the connections they have with the cities where they're located. So we have to have a broader approach to working with HBCUs and a higher standard for housing counseling out there. So it's not just HUD funding it, it's where the institutions say, this is an added value that the counseling agency is providing.
And
You have a comment on that?
And I would also say, don't take our word for it. Don't take a lot of rules of my word for it. Challenge us. Go attend the group session of housing counseling. Go for yourself. One of the things that I put right beside my degree is my housing counseling certificate. Because before I came to the position that I'm in now, I said to myself, you know, if I'm going to talk to Tyler, I never want to walk also. So I attended housing council, just, and no one in the class knew who I was, that I worked for HUD and I was their oversight. So it was a great session. And I thought that I knew everything about housing, real estate, everything, but I learned something in the class. So I'm saying I'm challenging each of you, and I'm challenging the audience on the internet. Take us up on this, challenge us, hold us accountable for what we say, because it's that valuable. And when you share it with someone, it could be a family member or a friend, when you share it with them, you're talking from the position of strength.
You have to see some of the eyes, so I know we have some comments, and I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I know you were going to say a comment, and I'm gonna get you, I promise. But I have one other question, because I can't let intergovernmental affairs go without a question. Let me put my fingers on so I can make sure I ask the question correctly, because you might correct me if I'm wrong. So, what intergovernmental partnerships? Because you're the one that connects us to the community, especially when it comes to your elected officials and so forth. So, what intergovernmental partnerships must be strengthened to enable the ecosystem in eliminating barriers to home ownership? I know that's a loaded question, but he's time enough for it. So we're going to have you answer that question.
Okay, well, first of all, our secretary is a former mayor. Not only is she a former member of Congress, not only is she the first Divine Nine national president to ever be a cabinet member. So she comes to this with a wealth of experience, but also she comes to this with the wealth of appreciation for the work that needs to be done. And although we're in a pandemic, and although many of us who work at HUD are still reimagining what returning to work looks like, I can tell you every day that she's in DC, she's at the office, and she's having these meetings, whether it's with the mayor of Atlanta. I heard Bruce talking about they'll be in Atlanta or Houston, whether it's working with Mayor Turner. It's about relationships first, because at the end of the day, if she can't relate, if she can't understand, then our job in intergovernmental affairs is a lot harder. And what she tells us, she challenges us every day. She says, innovate. Don't just be the normal intergovernmental shop. How can we innovate? How do you engage with these mayors? So, we're working with groups like mayors and CEOs that's headed by Mayor Libby Schaaf out of Oakland. But it's a rare group because it's a group of bipartisan mayors, right? It's not just, Democrat mayors who are just, loving the fact that Joe Biden is president. It's mayors like Mayor Giles of Mesa, who's a co-chair of this group. So we're working with them. We're working with, the African American Mayors Association, who's based here in DC, but their current president now, the previous president was Sylvester Turner, Mayor Turner out of Houston. The current president is Mayor Scott of Little Rock. I think he's a Morehouse grad. So, we sit down with them constantly. And the secretary, like I said, she challenges us. She says, look, Mrs. Allen, I want you to be in their face all the time. I want them to get tired of them calling you, because if they're calling us, it's a problem. So we want you to be, out there engaging, outreaching with them. And we do that. We do that. And so we're looking at, obviously, some of the work that the secretary has done, whether it's around PAVE, and taking that to groups like NACO, which is the National Association of County Officers, because that's where most of the appraisers reside at the county level, not at the city level. So we want to take this information, hopefully they take it, they absorb it, and then maybe make their own changes at the local level, because we know that we can't rely on Congress to be the only solution. And unfortunately, where we are with our current status on the Hill, a lot of times it slows down a lot. It gets done eventually. Like, we were thankful to see what happened on some of the gun rights legislation, but we have a lot of issues in our own communities and our neighborhoods that are just as critical that lead to some of these systemic issues that we find elsewhere in our communities, like some of the things we saw in Uvalde and whatnot. So we know that we can solve the kitchen table conversation, we know we can help solve the home ownership problem, then we have folks who now believe in their communities and they take more ownership in their communities, and we stop some of the other ongoing issues that take place. One of the things I want to talk about real quick is the secretary, when she decided, when she came in, she said, what can we do for students, in particular HBCU students or students of color? And one thing she did was she said, look, we want to go back and look at our FHA loans. How can we look at their debt to equity ratio? One of the things that many of you know that we did was we looked now at the first 40,000 in their student loans is not really factored into their debt to equity ratio. So by doing so, it now gives another swath of students, another swath of grads, an opportunity to realize their forever home earlier than they would. I remember when I came out and I had my student loans and I had to, I had to put it down. They already pulled it from my credit score, from the credit bureau, because they already knew what I couldn't fudge it. So to know that we are now giving another group of folks the opportunity to be homeowners, because now once they become homeowners, now they build equity. Now when they build equity, they can take some of that money, start as their business. They may be working, at IBM or wherever, but they may want to start, their company may want to, open up a dessert shop. They can take the equity from the home that they were able to purchase, that they didn't have to worry about a higher mortgage rate or what have you, because they were able to take that out. So, or not include that first 40,000. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. Also looking at the normal 30-year FHA mortgage, amortizing that out over 40 years now to reduce that monthly amount. And so that keeps more money, in those home buyers' pocket that they can use to pay for, daycare or pay for, the car, pay for, prescription drugs that are, probably too high and whatnot. And so we're trying to figure out ways to make sure that we are taking those resources that folks so desperately need, especially at times like we're living in now, and make sure they go back out and put it into the economy. But we do it with the lens of making sure that folks who have been disadvantaged, who don't come to the conversation, with the trust fund, don't come to the conversation with, a dowry and a bank account that they've passed down through generation. They're now creating that trust fund. They're now creating that wealth. And so one of the things that we're excited that we've done at HUD is we created for the first time in the history of HUD a senior advisor on racial equity, Adjua Asawa, who came to us. You may know her from the work she's done with the Crown Act that has been moving around the country and on Congress and in Congress. But so her job, we work together consistently and constantly, like, what can we do to kind of reimagine it and shake up, what this normal institution has been. And hopefully the work that we do, that, as the Secretary said, we won't turn this ocean liner 180 degrees, but hopefully we can turn it 25 degrees. And so the next person that takes it, he or she can turn another 25 degrees. And so ultimately, what we know to be homeownership in America changes and doesn't look like what we've been accustomed to for the past 40 years, or even what you marked in 1968 when the gap is a lot closer. So,
But Alan, you can't do a 40-year mortgage. That's not homeownership.
Well, you tell the secretary that.
I will.
Yeah, I will check it out.
That's not
And I'm gonna,
homeownership.
It's, well, I would say, to your point, you've been in this business
Yes.
longer than I have, but I've been in the business of people, and I've been in the business of trying to understand how, at the end of the day, how do we make sure that those that don't have the opportunity, like you said, they don't just come to housing counseling just because they want to be there. They come in with it's a journey, it's a destination in mind. And so what I would challenge you back with is that it's not both, it's not and, it's both and, right? It's an opportunity to look at how have we done this? And if we continue to do it the same way we've been doing it, then we're gonna be in the same situation we've been in.
But on that point, then come to where the people are, come to a NACA event, we get 20,000 people and saying.
I will. I already wrote it down. I'll be in Atlanta. Then I'm gonna-
I think that's an invitation.
But the point being is, you're right, but the government sets the standard, the government sets the standard. So, you know, during the mortgage crisis, right, when we were out there and we ended up modifying over 250,000 mortgages, we pushed back on the 40-year mortgage. Because we said, you know, if you look at the amortization, you don't really gain any equity until year 20 or 25 out there. That's not true homeownership, my friend. But anyway, that's a different.
When you tell that to Marcia Fudge.
Oh, I will.
You know,
When she comes to one of the events with the people.
well, well, I understand where you're going. I love the engagement. But what I would say is that, you know, for someone, and I come from a mother who worked, you know, 2 jobs, right? And she paid her mortgage on time, all the time. But you can't tell me that if she would have had an extra $150 in the bank account to make sure that we had other things that we need to be met, that she wouldn't have taken that at the same time while still achieving home ownership and paying off the mortgage like she did. So it's a both end. It can't be, you know, this.
But if I can add one more thing to what you're saying.
One more thing, and then I want to definitely
But
let the
what- sorry,
audience
when
engage.
you talk about what HUD can do and what the government can do, you know, we need to change the paradigm of how we do housing development out there. So for example, like we were contacted by the mayor of Schenectady, New York. And he says, instead of me, he's got over 1,000 units of housing. So he said, instead of me having the developers out there, you know, doing that and adding on 20 or 30% to the cost, I want to use NACA so that the home buyers can buy those homes for $1 from the city, and through NACA and hopefully others have the money to renovate them. So we have to look at a different paradigm of how to do that. So yes, we're going to be able to have a to really change a city, Schenectady and hopefully others, and saying, let's not go through developers. Let's do a direct connection from the city selling those homes to the home buyers for $1, having the financing there to do the renovation. You're saving cost and you're empowering the home buyers on that. So that's a different paradigm. That's what we want to have the conversation with Marcia Fudge, who, if she would agree to meet with us, that would be nice on that.
And I think that's a good segue into now opening it up so that our audience can get involved. Because what you're speaking of, and you and the dialogue with Alan, is what we're doing. That's why we're here. We are reimagining how innovative home ownership looks like. So I want to open it up to the audience. Thank you all so much, and don't go anywhere because we definitely have some great questions. I'm going to start with you. She had her hand, she was in her seat, ready to ask a question. So I'm going to turn the mic over. Thank you. I even have a helper. This is wonderful. I don't need that. I used to be a children. There we go.
And I have to get all the time. So my voice carries. I am so grateful for you. Yeah. Are you want to record it?
Oh, we have Zoom. Yeah, so you may need a Zoom call.
Oh, yeah. Have to be considerate of people. My name is Janice Crum. And one of the best jobs I've ever had was working with Secretary Henry Cisneros at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, where we traveled from city to city, tumbling down those old Robert Taylor homes type buildings and replacing them with homes, single family homes, multi-family homes, units for families where kids could actually grow up and see somebody going to work every day. That was my greatest joy. My second greatest joy, now talking about my husband and kids, I'm talking professional, was working with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation on a program called With Ownership Well, where the mortgage industry and the mortgage finance industry came together and decided to give people all over the country an opportunity to buy homes when they'd never done that before. Number 3, because my husband was a builder when we graduated from college, it only took us a year to get our first home. We bought it, we sold it, and he built with his own 2 hands a 5,000 square foot home. I'm saying that to say, if you teach your children the value of home ownership, they will never be poor. And so when I worked with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, I came up with a program for HBCU students. It was called SHOP, S-H-O-P, Student Homeownership Opportunity Program. And Hampton University was our biggest success because we had 300 seniors to show up. And Milan, I worked with your mother, and just tell her I said hi. We had 300 seniors to show up, and they had realtors, mortgage bankers, and real estate finance people there on the spot that represented national organizations, so that it did not matter where they settled. They had a commitment to buy a home when they get to their location. So what I did recently was I wrote this up, and someone found me on LinkedIn and said, "Are you that Janice Crump?" And I said, "Yes, I am. And I am trying to revive this HBCU home ownership program, because I guarantee you, if you tell those kids their freshman year that all you got to do is not load up on credit card debt, keep your path clean, when you graduate, we're going to have a session for all the seniors who want to buy homes wherever you go in the country. We're going to invite nationally represented real estate and mortgage bankers. We're going to have them there so you can sign on the dotted line. And when you get to your city, you can get into a home. We did that 20 years ago. My daughter built her first home in Atlanta. She was in the program at the age of 22. She sold that when she moved to the DC area. She bought a condo, she sold that. She is now in her 3rd home. Okay, that's my kid. All 3 of my kids are homeowners because they follow the same path. We can do this. We have the perfect captive audience in these HBCUs. All they need to know is, don't try to call those credit cards those people are trying to get you get your freshman year. Keep your credit clean. And when you graduate, we promise you, we will have a representative in your city who can get you into a home. And the ones that we had allowed the young people to get into homes without a down payment. Some of them had to come up with maybe $1,000 or $500 earnest money, but that's all they needed. And most of them were able to get that from their parents. So what I'm saying is that this can be turned around immediately, starting with the class of 2022, starting with the class of 2023. Tell those kids when they get to campus, this is your senior year. Don't accept all of those credit card companies that are going to be coming after you. Keep your billing low, keep your debt low. And when you graduate, we're going to have a homeownership event on your campus that will allow you to sign up for home. So I'm here today, hoping that we can make that a reality, because it's been done before and it can be done again. When I left the CBCF, unfortunately, the focus was on trips to China, and the program that I instituted there was not continued. But we can do this, and we can turn around ownership on a dime, because all those kids and all those HBCUs are ready You just gotta show them the path.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it's truly an honor to have you here. So thank you for being here.
Delighted to be.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Tanisha Richardson from Freddie Mac. I have a couple of things to say, and I appreciate your sentiment. And I think in addition to that, we also have to consider that I'll speak from my own personal experience as a first generation college student. A lot of students at HBCU are first generation college students. So with that, often they don't have a lot of the additional support from their family that may allow them or enable them to be able to be mobilized once they graduate. And so I think that it's really important that we provide that because it's not something that's always, it's not given in schools, we know that by education, but it's also not something that a lot of our parents know either. So we have to factor that in. I also wanted to point out that while we talk about the alumni of HBCUs, I want to talk about the attrition rates at HBCUs because they're extremely high. And I don't think that we should limit ourselves to only HBCU alumni because there's several students, and I'll speak again from my personal experience. I was at Howard for several years in the recession, lost my financial aid, had to go back home and finish school. And that does not mean I'm not HBCU in my blood. I have it in my blood. And so I just think we should also consider all HBCU students, all former HBCU students. And then the last thing that I wanted to say was I wanted to talk about housing supply and the fact that it is a problem and we have to find competitive, affordable products. Because the problem with affordable products and a problem with the FHA loan is that it's not competitive in the market. When you go to put up an offer for a home, they say, oh, you have an FHA loan. They're gonna go to that conventional loan before they go to that FHA loan because it takes longer to close. It's more paperwork, there's more requirements. And so when we talk about how we're going to make this competitive opportunity for people, if we're not trying, our goal isn't to qualify them for homeownership. Our goal is to get them into homes. So we have to think about a product that's going to be competitive in the market because that is, and I'll say again from my personal experience, I personally have an FHA loan and I was not allowed to put in an offer on a home because they said they don't want any FHA loans. And so it's something that you have to think about in how you're going to create a competitive product that's actually going to service the people we're trying to serve.
And if I could add one thing to that, because you're exactly right. The issue that we hear a lot about is about supply. But remember who's taking the supply of homeownership out of the mix. It's the hedge funds, it's these venture capitalists who are bidding on these properties for cash. So they're outbidding someone who has an FHA or a NACO or any of those mortgages. We should take it on. So it's, you know, it's a distraction. We say, oh, we have to build more affordable housing, of course. But we're not going to be able to build enough affordable housing to even stay even because these predatory investors, these corporate investors are out there outbidding people, buying these single family homes, renting them out to the same people who could be homeowners generating wealth. And that's the role of government to say, we have to stop that. And we have to take on these, you know, these cash investors out there. It's Invitation Homes, it's all those players out there to take on that campaign because they're buying those single family homes. They're the largest landlords in the country out there. And the same renters could be homeowners, but all they're doing is lining the pockets of these wealthy investors out there. That's the campaign that we should be on, holding those CEOs personally accountable for that and not allowing them to do business.
And we know that they can afford the mortgage because they're paying.
And they're paying rent, right? And we're not talking about that out there. We're talking about the supply. We're never gonna be able to address that unless we deal with those creditors.
You know, that's why I think one of the things that if you look in the president's budget that he has before Congress right now, it's to over the next by 2030, you know, bring I believe over 1 million new homes into the market. And so some of the things, that we're looking at, you know, as Bruce said, it's kind of taking a closer look at that. I mean, if you look at even some of the homes that we have that are kind of HUD on the Rios and the claims without conveyance, we're now saying, instead of putting it on the market in 15 days, we're now giving it 30 days and working with local governments, working with not-for-profits, working with chodos to say, okay, look, you have the funds to buy those and keep those homes affordable. And so we're looking at that. A lot of times we get a lot of, as Ms. Crump knows from her time, we have a lot of troubled properties within the HUD portfolio that a lot of times developers or owners will then revert back or decide not to keep the housing voucher, and which doesn't keep that project affordable. And so we're working with our folks internally at HUD to do all we can when we have those projects come up, to work with the developer to say, okay, what can we do to make sure you are up to, code, up to, make sure your REACT score is above passing and whatnot, to make sure that we can keep these projects affordable. And so we're working with mayors like Andre Dickens in Atlanta and issues that they have with Forest Cove. We're working with the Silver Oaks of Tampa, working with Mayor Castor and other mayors around the country who a lot of times their hands are tied because these properties are privately owned, but they also receive, HUD voucher, HUD support. So we're working to make sure that where they are, derelict in their duties, that hopefully maybe another developer or someone will come in and purchase that. And so our folks within FHA and within multifamily are working feverishly to try to address these issues that we have, both at the multifamily level, but also within single family. Our Deputy Assistant Secretary Julianne Joseph, who heads up a single family, is doing a great job in the fact that she's looking at these. She comes from community of color, and she understands, she's a Black woman, she understands how do we address these issues. And so I think what you see at HUD right now in Danberry and some of the folks who've been there a lot longer than I can tell that I've been there will tell you that this is probably the most diverse HUD that you've seen in a very, very long time. So, and we come to it with our own experiences and our own situations that we can, attest to, that hopefully we, address, like you said, whether it's the families who kids are maybe third or fourth generation college students, or whether it's families who are first generation college students, somewhere in between, we're going to hopefully address all of that. And that's what I believe this relationship, this secretary is trying to engage with America.
Absolutely. Thank you.
My name is Dante Jackson. So my question to everyone here that works with alphabets in the government, from FHFA to FHA and everyone, what are we going to do about access? What are we going to do about access to mortgage finance? We have, 3.5% down. We have upfront MI. We have MI. It's not really affordable. We have working adults that attend HBCU. They're working all day, going to school at night. They should have access to a product also. They don't have credit card debt, but they pay rent. What are you going to do about allowing rent to be part of the calculation on affordability if they qualify for a home? Are we going to take FICO? Are we going to take FICO out of the box? Are we, because they're determining who qualifies for a mortgage, right? Why should they, a corporation? I know he's looking at me like, oh, I promise I did not get this. This is all me. This is all me.
We started texting to you. You don't know Dante.
And I used to work at HUD, so I know exposure. I used to work at HUD, Department of Risk Management, so I understand what's going on there. I understand the product, the portfolio. So my question is, what are we going to, what is FHFA going to do about access? What homeownership blacks, 49%, 43%, something like that. So now we're talking about HBCU students, about their parents. We have to address everything. I understand we're here specifically talking about HBCU students, but we need to address everything before we start that particular group. They don't have any money. They don't need money. No, wait a second, wait. I don't mean it like that. I don't mean it like that. What I mean is, they're just coming into the workforce. They have a long runway, they really do, but, and I agree with all of that. But we have to start, let's start with the alumni. Let's start with their parents. Let's start with everything. We can teach them financial responsibility while they're in college. We can give them a mortgage when they come out of school, the day one. We can also get them jobs. Day one. But we have to address. But if you get them a job and a mortgage, that's building wealth and building a lifestyle for them. But my main question is, what are we going to do about access?
So one of the big things, sorry to interrupt, but and this will be addressed not only in this session, but in subsequent sessions, is access to capital. Capital is one of the biggest issues that we have to address, and how capital flows. Because it's the flow of capital that we have to have better understanding of, and make sure that that flow is working for the next generation of not only students, but all homeowners and entrepreneurs. Because to your point, Secretary, the job creation is equally as important as the housing creation, because we can't continue to build housing and put people in these houses that don't have jobs, because we know what that's going to come to, right? So these are all big issues. So I don't want to take away from where we are in the program, so I'll turn it back over to our moderator.
No, I think you're all raising great points. I mean, I think to answer one of your questions, and I'm going to let my panel speak, because I'm just the moderator, so I'm supposed to stay in my lane. And then I'm also getting a time that I need to kind of end this lovely discussion. I wish we could keep it going, but. And I was, well, thank you. Well, maybe we need to. No, but you're absolutely right. This is going to address a lot of what you're saying. You have to have these conversations. You have to have people with lived experiences in the room. You also have people that make the decisions, make the policy. You've got a panel full of either, the educators, the mortgage brokers. You've got your government here. You have people with lived experiences who see this as an opportunity to really get things going. So I hope you're going to stay for the next session, which is that design thinking, where they're really going to be throwing these opportunities. I don't say challenges anymore. These opportunities out on the table that we can all address together. My role is I'm a policymaker. So these are things that I see your advisors in the room. I don't go anywhere without her. She's the real boss. But she's taking notes. So don't think that this conversation is going to go stale. We are here because we have a responsibility to go back to our leadership and talk to them about the very issues that you bring up. So on behalf of HUD, I want to thank you for raising that as a concern, because it is something you do. Absolutely. So,
But I have a question for you.
okay.
And the policy maker, right?
Yes.
With HUD, right?
Yes.
How is it that you allow HUD and FHA to charge people higher interest rate if they have a lower credit score?
How do I?
No, that's what HUD does. So as fair housing.
I just want to be clear.
As fair housing, you can ask Marshall Fudge on that when you talk about innovation. Shouldn't it be where someone's ready for home ownership, right?
Yeah.
And they're ready, they should get the same rate as everybody else gets, regardless of what their credit score is. If you're ready, you're ready. If you're gonna be a homeowner, you're gonna be a homeowner.
Okay.
HUD should not be out there supporting basically a predatory practice that says the lower the interest rate, the higher the MI, the higher the interest, the lower the credit score, the higher the MI, the higher the interest rate. That's a policy issue that, from a fair housing issue, maybe you should look internally at HUD and saying, maybe I should investigate HUD for their practices, and then have that as a standard before we look outside, or maybe in conjunction.
It's a broader system.
It's a broader, absolutely, and I thank you for that. I want you to continue to hold me accountable for the things that are being done and that are not being done. But, and that's why we have these wonderful executive orders that are actually making us make these, to go in these directions. As Alan mentioned, we have a secretary who gets it. And she's not just talking about it, she is walking the walk. So we have a leadership that's in place that are taking opportunities that you mentioned, Bruce, and are having it surrounding themselves with a team that's is going to affect change. Now, I don't want this conversation to stop. However, I think my job here is done. So on that note, I'm going to turn it back over to Dan, who's going to allow this conversation to continue in a different form. Is that correct? I want to thank you. I want to thank my panelists who did an outstanding job. So thank you for that.
Okay, well, that was kind of a calm, mild manner discussion. Thank you for your work, DeAndra, in engaging in such a fantastic. Really. We have one more question? So it sounded like we had one. I was just for him.
The passion in the panel. Thank you for that. Well, my name is Richard Allen. I work with student advocacy. Better part of a decade now, we started an organization called Pay Attention. We're specifically talking about HBCU students. One of the opportunities or challenges that they have towards the end of graduation is not graduating, right? And it's one of the things that troubles me most. I'm trying to speak for the students. Is that I would like to see the two departments we're mainly talking about here, also have conversations with the Department of Education. Because one of the things that I've seen working with students, and one of the products that Casey and I have created are bridge funding, so that students don't stop at the very end and become a default student, and then that's not a home buyer. So there could be some programming around how do we want to increase graduation rate when students are dropping out literally for sometimes as little as a few $100s. And now instead of being a crowd, your story resonated with me so much. It happens so frequently. And what you were able to do, which is the story is still finished. And so it's heartbreaking to see students work so hard, spend so much money of government, because a lot of them are coming in student loans, of course, and not be able to graduate. So we have to have a conversation of how do we transform this debt into more opportunities. Because this is what all we're talking about, building that Dr. Hollis said, building that equity. And if we can start to move this debt that they've already taken on into a real asset that they can build wealth, sell their first home, and now with that equity, pay off the government and then buy the next home. So I think that is a bridge we need to really take a look at, since we're specifically talking about students becoming home buyers a lot sooner than they are.
So let me just throw this out. There have been a lot of great ideas kind of thrown out there. I would love to take some of this back, especially to Ajwa Asamoah, as we're looking at some of these issues and address that. And so obviously I'll be here afterwards. But I think it's opportunities like this to have a conversation, but I think conversations have been had for many, many years, decades, especially in this city. But to have someone that is willing to listen and really put the resources behind that is what's different now at HUD. And so, again, we won't turn this steamliner 180 degrees, but by the time that we have it, we're going to do all we can to be down in the boardroom, putting the coal in to help the secretary up at Starboard, guide the ship in a different direction. And so you have my commitment on that.
We've got to cut it off for a minute here now, but we're going to take a quick break. Okay, I want to just say one other thing, that I want everyone to realize that we have many agencies in the room, not just HUD. Department of Education is here represented, Fannie, Freddie, Sally, everybody is here for this purpose, and everyone has come overwhelmingly with an open mind to think about how do we do things differently. So again, to your point, Secretary, this isn't about just the conversation. This is about how we're going to actually move to make the changes that we need to see. So quick turn over to.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea Jones. I'm from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Like lovely people here. I just wanted to make the point that HUD is committed to using all of the information that you were giving, and we're creating an innovation lab specifically designed to address this issue. So I just want to let you know that we're in the room, we are listening, and we are creating an innovation challenge to address this issue, and it's forthcoming. If you want to be a part of that, stay in the room. Let us know that you want to be a part of this, because it takes all of you, right? It's about customers, right? What you see on the ground, how we bring all that information inside and create a new service delivery model that meets the needs of the people, the taxpayers. So I want to thank you for that.
Okay, I just want to mention also the Reimagining here, and our president, Milan, is a very big on the list. So this is just to reassure you that when it's important, the investment also needs to be debated, and we're working with FHA, so definitely another count on this, another support on this, and she was going to be here with us. Unfortunately, she did not make it, but definitely it's something she's gonna go with. Great. So thank you, everybody. It's hard to contain the energy in this room. But I'm just gonna give everybody a chance to stretch their leg. I do want to acknowledge, and I was reticent earlier, in also recognizing Omar Bouachi, who just spoke, who's been a key part of our planning team. And Tina Strong, who's been a key part of our planning team, and the wizard on the Zoom. For all of you that are watching the Zoom, Leif Reyes, who is a HUD support contractor with Deloitte, is doing masterful work in working with our team in the room. So thanks to everybody for all of your work to make this interesting hybrid conversation go forward. I also want to remind everybody that on the Zoom and in the room, if you haven't already, to scan that QR code, because we'll be doing some polling, right? And part of the design thinking session, I want to make sure I have this right, is we're going to be creating a digital student wallet, right? And so that all the resources that we've heard about today can go into like a digital wallet where students can easily access it. What a great thing to produce. So everybody, thank you. Have a good let's try to take 5 minutes. I know 5 usually stretches to 10, but let's not really stretch as much beyond 5 if we can. So we're going to come back in 5 to 7 minutes or so, but think about 5.
And Dan, real quick, I know this is really close now. I just want to make this historical note, and I'm glad you brought this up. But you have Elena McCargo, president of Ginnie Mae. You have Sandra Thompson, and you have Secretary Marsha Fudge. For the first time in the history of this country, 3 Black women, right? You know, in the era and the spirit of Ketanji Brown Jackson and Vice President, Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson and Vice President Kamala Harris. You have an energy and you have a moment in time where the Breonna Taylors of the world, who sometimes are not spoken and forgotten, you have 3 women who are leading this reimagining homeownership for America, not just for Black women, not for Black men, but for the entire country.
Thank you. All right, folks, there's plenty of food in the room, 5 minutes, and for the folks on the Zoom, take a break. We'll see you in 5 minutes.
Okay, please do, please do. So you work with Sandra? Okay, good, yeah, she is a legend, you know, around HomeFree. So tell her we said hi on behalf of HomeFree and Marcia. Okay, thank you so much.
We certainly are looking for talented individuals to replenish a housing counselor, certified housing counselor workforce. So within that context, absolutely we encourage students. That's one of the cornerstones of our initiative. So we still need to encourage students who are interested to look at the possibility of taking the training, online training, and also connect with a local article housing case. As I mentioned earlier, we have approximately 1,500 article agencies nationwide. So connect with one of them, see what they're looking for, and talk to them about employment with them, becoming certified, and something employment with them. And now I cannot speak to whether or not I will pay that portion of the workforce training. I can't speak to that, but the opportunities for employment are great. And the South of the largest groups and Milan attest to it, but it's sustainable. It's a nice steady income or potential housing counseling. So it's a great idea.
Sure. So one of the things that we're doing is that we are, the HBCUs have asked us to open up an office, each one of the 11 HBCUs. So we know that the lenders are also looking to fund different things, to hire appraisers of color to do those jobs out there. So I think that's the model out there, that you have, an economic, or any other organization, an economic justice office in the HBCUs to really provide job opportunities, because it's there. People are looking for a model that works. So I think that's the key part. And, I wouldn't, we'll fund that stuff out there. So it's not a matter that we're waiting for funding from HUD or anybody else to do it. We're getting some, but we'll fund all that.
All right, make sure we get that on record. He's gonna fund it.
So I wanted to also say this is an opportunity for apprenticeship, particularly with the Department of Labor. They have a lot of apprenticeships, and I think Stacy and I connect with the innovation office over there and Department of Labor to talk about the possibility of that internship and that apprenticeship that might lead to those better wages.
Yeah, there's one more question that comes from an anonymous participant, and it says, why is the number of housing discrimination complaints that the HUD solved for the last few years so low? The housing discrimination complaint timeline is broken, and HUD is taking a long time to solve each complaint, and the cases are mishandled in the investigation process, resulting in more harm for the victims and complaints. And there is no escalation process to hold them accountable. Where can escalations for mishandled cases be sent? The Office of the Director of Enforcement does not respond to voicemail or mail. And they follow up saying that they can provide further information after the event because they understand the main focus is working with the HBCUs to promote fair housing, access to affordable housing and career opportunities. And as we further access to fair housing, we need to have confidence in the complaint process, as this is an important aspect of fair housing.
And also to add to that, we also heard that if you have housing counseling, attached to your loan, that it also signals that you may be a minority. So to the point of this question, how can we ensure that lenders are not using the housing counseling resources against the underwriting process? So what this question is asking, where do they go into?
So I'll just take that question. It would be great that person that asked that question, whether they could provide their email in the chat, and we'll make sure it gets to the appropriate resources and can respond.
Keep the questions coming online. We want to keep you engaged. We have a poll that you should also be participating in, and we'll turn it back over to Karen.
Okay, so this is dynamic discussion and just absolutely wonderful. Okay, so to that point, we talked about the poll, and so if you have your sheet, there's a QR code in the sheet, or if you're online, you should see a QR code that allows you to use your cell phone to access the poll. There are 3 questions, and so we want to give you a few minutes to answer those questions. And The gist of the poll is just to really get a sense from the stakeholders that we have in the room, where the challenges lie, what are the barriers, because we're gonna focus on those as we start talking through solutions. We've been talking all morning about solutions, and we want to keep that conversation going. We want to dive a little deeper. And then I do just want to say, this is not a one and done conversation. This is not a one-time discussion. So as we've had some things being suggested, Andre talked about the innovation lab and HUD's commitment from that perspective, the Department of Education, bringing these stakeholders together to actually bring some of these solutions to life is our next goal. So while you're doing the poll, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy to talk a little bit about some of the genesis of these conversations and her experience from the entrepreneurial perspective.
Sure. All right. So this conversation really started with IBM and the Department of Ed and Federal Student Aid almost 2 years ago, but we were trying to reimagine what student loan debt looks like for minority students specifically. And we thought about this idea of a student digital wallet and how can we stack programs, stack resources, stack money, down payment programs and things like that in a one wallet that a student can graduate to the point we're all saying here that you can be home buyer ready. Fast forward, I've recently joined Freddie Mac in the equitable housing team, but unofficially I'm not here representing Freddie Mac today. But also too, Freddie Mac's here in the room as well as, like we said, Jenny Mae. And so we want to look at, there was a little bit of a disconnect between, like what Bruce brought up earlier, the housing choice voucher and how the housing choice voucher could go from renting to purchasing and allowing that to help where students are being burdened down more with student loan debt. And so I think we have Dr. Lucas online from Virginia Union, as well as other HBCUs who have said, this makes a lot of sense. We need to figure out, we have a student housing crisis on campus. While they're in school, maybe there could be rental vouchers that could be also used to help the students find housing. And so we wanted to just throw all of these problems out there. And we want to start this design session with just talking through the barriers first, and then we'll shift back over to solutions because we want to make sure that we're capturing both housing choice vouchers and HUD resources and what are some barriers in the HUD programs, as well as on the lending side. Where are we doing on the financing side that we could be able to find another way to be creative, to find more solutions to have the programs complement each other. Right now, they're not talking to each other, they're not working together. We need the loans and the resources to really complement each other. So that's sort of how this conversation started, both IBM, Carmon, Dr. Jolly, NACA, everyone here in the room, we all just came together because we all have a common goal. So we want to keep this energy going.
All right, so the poll results are coming in, and it's really interesting to see what people are saying about what some of the barriers are. Lost sound. Can you hear us? Okay. So as we see here, we've got our barriers listed, and what we're going to do at this point is talk more in depth about how we start to resolve some of these barriers. So let's look at our top three: down payment amount requirements, credit, and student loans. At your seats, I think each one should have some colored sheets and markers that allow you to start ideating on solutions and things that we can do to start actually solving these problems. So does everyone have the stickies? Oh, yes, yeah. So the handouts are just for your visual guide. So what we're going to do is we want to open the discussion up, similar to what we did earlier this morning, where we had a really dynamic flow of ideas back and forth. We want to start taking some of those ideas and we're going to stick them on our board here. We're going to grab your ideas, your concepts, and your thoughts, and we're going to dive deeper into them. So, yeah. So the stakeholders in the room, I think we've got a good number of them identified. So we've got government, we've got financial institutions. Are there financial institutions with us? on the Zoom. HBCUs are represented. We've also got industry represented. Real estate developers, yeah, absolutely. Nonprofits. And do we have any students themselves?
Moms of students.
There we go. Yeah, moms of soon-to-be students. Well, in a few years.
Are we missing any stakeholders that should, that for the next conversation, any other stakeholders that we didn't think about today?
Yeah.
In school today.
Let's just go through stakeholders.
And administrators.
Administrators, absolutely. Yeah, very good point. Yes. Okay. So I think we've got our cadre of folks represented here. So, so let's keep the conversation from this morning going. We're gonna talk through our journey. So we wanted to frame this discussion from the perspective of a student themselves. So just like you brought up, you know, that's where we want to focus because that's who's most important here. We framed this from the perspective of a young student named Carmon, who is an HBCU student who has come to the DC area to finish school, to get a technology degree and lands a job at IBM. So we'll have her work for IBM. And she wants to be a homeowner. She knows that that's the pathway to home, to building wealth, to having the life that she wants to have, to passing down something to her future generations. And so now, with that being said, how do we look at some of the challenges that we see here from her perspective? How do we help her in each phase of her life move down this pathway towards homeownership and continued homeownership? So starting pre-college, right? When Carmon's in high school, when students are not even yet walking through the doors of an HBCU, is there something that we can offer or do to help them at that point in their lives? Then moving into their college years, their early post-graduation years, and then their years later beyond, how do we keep that pathway moving for them? So, yeah, that's correct.
As part of the senior, as part of the senior year experience, teach them the value of not loading up on credit. Teach them the value of paying as they go. Very few students who go to the top three, Howard, Hampton, and Spelman, can get in without a student loan. My kids went to Howard, Hampton, and Spelman. They all had student loans. And the first thing that, when they went to buy homes, the first thing the realtors did was say, we're not going to count your student loan against your credit. That cleared the board for everything else that they needed to do. They could pay their student loans, they just refinanced them so the payment would be lower. The real estate company, finance company did not count that as part of their debt, and each one of them was able to build a home or buy a home. So it's extremely important. Most of the kids at HBCUs have student loans. If you're gonna count that as part of their debt when they're trying to get a home, they're not gonna get one. So that's one of the main things that this industry can do to help kids who are graduating from college get into a home. Do not count their student loan against them.
So do not count student loans in the underwriting process for the mortgage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, is that no policy? And so while we're going to the next question, just asking in general, is that policy today?
Tanisha.
Tanisha's running back today.
But is that, I mean, you know, is that across the board or is that available to everyone?
So I'm not an underwriter. So I'm not an underwriter, so I'm not going to speak on what underwriting standards are. All I was doing to add to the conversation was that I think that it needs to happen, that financial literacy needs to happen well before they're senior. And the reason is because you're getting credit for our position you turn 18. And I know some of my classmates that got incurred debt sophomore year just to manage their business. So I think that if we're talking about what education is needed, if we're looking at the journey map and we're talking about what education is needed before college, we really need to influence, I think this is where the Department of Education comes in, influence the importance of financial literacy in high school. High school seniors need to receive financial literacy. College freshmen need to receive financial literacy because that is their opening to credit, and they need to learn how to use credit, not don't use credit. That's also dangerous for people to say, oh, don't get a credit card, don't use credit at all, because their credit is and they still won't qualify for a mortgage. So we need to teach people how to properly use credit and influence people to get credit and use it the right way, so that way when they do graduate, they're ready.
And also, we have federal student back in the room, Ms. Coy-Con. Just want to make sure everyone knows we do have Department of Education representation in the room.
I mean, this is great conversation. So we're saying that starting that financial literacy early, senior year, maybe even junior year, right? I mean, really getting people to have a change in mindset as they start to approach college. And so now, can we delve into that a little bit more? So Craig, you wanna?
Yep, so good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Let me do my disclaimer first. I do not speak on behalf of the secretary, the undersecretary, the chief of federal student aid. But it was good to hear a lot of the conversation this morning and know that I am not technically on the business side of federal student aid, but my colleagues have taught me enough about business to know and understand where we should be collaborating and coordinating and educating each other. So a couple of things that I just wrote down as I was listening to the conversation this morning. There is a body called the FLEC, Financial Literacy Education Commission, of which I believe HUD is a member. The FSA Chief Operating Officer also is a member of that body. I believe it is chaired by the Secretary of Treasury, is that right?
Yes.
And CFPB is co-chair. CFPB coordinates with us and a lot of other organizations across government. Financial literacy is their business. So we do a lot with them in the space of the financial student aid piece. So that is definitely an avenue we can pursue. I did see that there was a meeting with your 1,500 plus partners at some point, providing them with resources, but I also recognize that education was not included as one of those resources. So the first thing we can do is provide information that's already publicly available into the education stream for resources. I also know that our Higher Education Act requires entrance and exit counseling for financial aid. So it is required. Now, granted, it is often not a face-to-face. It is something that is online, and we know that that can definitely be improved with outreach. However, it's required by law. Not to say that the HUD piece, we don't necessarily need to look for legislation. If there's a way for us or HUD to piggyback on that, either with us or through institutions to make that information available, I think that's an easy win and something that we definitely have control over. There is also a lot of activity around, of course, with the pandemic. I also heard credit reporting. I think I heard you mention that earlier. I could be wrong, but somebody mentioned something about credit scores earlier. Because of the pandemic, there was a pause, as you know, on student loan payments. But there was also a pause on credit reporting of negative information to credit reports. We did find at some point that there was still negative reporting for credit reports. So what are we doing to continue to have interested folks in homeownership, checking their credit reports on a regular basis and know what's supposed to be there and what's not supposed to be there. So it goes along with the financial literacy piece. And one last thing, there are two organizations or two opportunities within student aid. There's experimental sites. Now, my policy folks will probably say, who are you to talk about experimental sites? I know just enough to be dangerous to know that there is something called experimental sites. And there's an opportunity for someone to assess whether or not some of the things you talk about here could be rolled into an experimental site effort. And then there also is an organization within federal student aid, minority serving underrepresented groups. That organization that focuses on the expected outcomes of executive orders related to HBCUs, a dedicated group. They provide what information is available directly to institutions. Unless there is some legal prohibition, it makes sense that they should be able to provide the information to other entities as well. So just wanted to lay out all those resources.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's amazing. So thank you. And just so you know, I mean, there's a lot of discussion going around. We're capturing all of this, and we're gonna actually, as an outcome of this meeting, send all of these actions out. And so we're gonna continue, like I said, this is not a one and done conversation. So we'll continue to track these and to work through each of these actions. So, okay. So any other commentary, thoughts? We're looking at the before college education and what actions we can take there.
So I just wanted to add that, as my colleague from the Department of Education mentioned, so it's important that we embed housing counseling as early as possible and have that be a continuing piece of the puzzle for that individual. And we're flexible, as our agencies here can attest to. We can work around their schedules. We can provide counseling via internet, telephone, and so forth. But it's important that they maintain this relationship, because it's not only just housing counseling, but it's financial and debt management and so forth, so that as that student matriculates, they have a plan. They start out with a plan and they work that plan so that by the time they graduate and whatever their future endeavors are, they hit their marks. There are no setbacks because they've already planned for it, and they are educated as to all of their possibilities and what's available, both in the federal sector as well as the private sector. And that's very important because there are resources in both. And as Ellen mentioned earlier, there's no one solution for everyone. It could take a combination of many things, but that student and eventual young adult won't know that until they immerse themselves with the people that do know, and that they can trust in the advice that they give.
What I would also add, so I do know that there's counseling available now for students when they take out a student loan. I'm going back to school in the fall. I just did that counseling, and it is, I would say if there's opportunity for it to be more robust in that it really only talks about the loan that you're taking out, and it really doesn't talk about how to manage debt, and it doesn't talk about financial literacy. To your point, Danberry, but there's other aspects. It's not just about housing counseling. It's not just about financial literacy. It's not just about debt management. It's about all three of those things to create an ecosystem of financial wealth. And I think that you have the opportunity, as soon as someone says, I need to take out a loan, you're asking to be a part of this debt system. You're saying, I'm enrolling into this program of having debt, figuring out my credit, doing all of these things So therefore, I think that's the prime opportunity for you to introduce and require financial literacy training, because you're already saying, I want this debt, so in order to take this debt responsibly, I need to finish this training, as you do in housing counseling. I need to qualify for this home. So they're saying I need to take housing counseling, I need to take financial literacy counseling or debt management counseling in order to receive this loan, which then sets you up and gives you the information to move forward over the years versus kind of getting into these financial binds and then you don't really know what to do, and then you're graduating, you're faced with opportunities to purchase a home, but you've made decisions in the past that were uninformed and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, Tracy.
Yeah, I'm gonna come at this from a pretty different perspective than I've heard in the room. So I'm Tracy, he's a I'm Jean's partner at Uncommon Impact, and I spent 11 years at Google up until this past March. And part of that was I started and ran all of our ethical AI for Google Cloud. And so have a lot of perspective on how technology can be used here in an appropriate and fair and restorative way, which means actually really overcorrecting for harms that have been done over many, many generations. And I also spent 4 years at Google for Education. Now, there are opportunities to do things like a financial literacy curriculum through partnering with something like Google for Education, who through their workspace product are in almost every school district in the US. And there are ways I think that can be done to then apply maybe some interesting ways of funding to not only come out of starting in elementary school, but also to then come out of high school with a financial literacy certificate of some sort. But what if those students also, as a part of that, were then educating their parents? And that when their parents then also were I don't know, passed some sort of financial literacy test or however you want to assess that, then those students actually received a grant or a more financial aid for their college, so that they are not as burdened with student loans. So I think there are some interesting ways to think about really starting early. I think there's potential partnerships again for parent education through things like daycare centers and Head Start centers, as well as things like Bright Horizons, all the places where there are universal pre-K, providing that literacy again to parents. There are some other like technology offerings around building credit for kids that again can be sort of pulled into the picture here in some interesting ways that we can combine that public-private partnership.
Thank you. We have Dr. Jolly, and then then Alan, and then Brian from the fintech industry. So I wanted to go next.
So navigating back to the outcome of the digital wallet, what I've found, I've been recently doing a lot of focus group research with HBCUs about wealth creation. That seeing is believing, the ability to be able to connect the dots. And so really having that whole stack of information, because there's so many different great programs across the country, I've said it, a lack of awareness, not just what they are, but how to use them and when to use them. But also the connectivity, to your point about technology, the ability to have key points of information. So I'm getting a job at IBM and I'm going to be placed in New York. So I can start to see what the price of a property is. And I can start to say, this is how I want to live. This is what I want to be able to afford. But also the data needs to be used to be able to make an affordability a reality in those communities for the income levels in which they have it. So we can connect all the dots, but to really be focused on what we are here is how do we build that digital wallet that provides the level of information and the level of engagement that's necessary so that our students want to do this and want to share how they want to do it, so that they can get prepared to be able to really execute and really do it.
Can I add something to that? Super fast.
We're going to the wallet.
Yeah, so super fast. So there, and I'm going to draw a parallel here that I think could be leveraged. So Harvey Mudd, which is one of the top computer science schools in the country, for many, many years had a 50-50% computer science major across genders. When students declare their majors. But by the time students were graduating, the majority of the women had dropped out. And only men were graduating with computer science degrees. And so they did a really interesting thing, which they did the right thing. They asked, why is that happening? And they asked the young women who had started in computer science and then dropped out. And the problem was that the young women, they had no idea how to connect the education they would receive with making a difference in the world. And so Harvey Mudd did a very simple thing. They changed the names of the courses to reflect what the courses would, the skills they would give you and how you might be able to apply them in the world. And within 4 years, they graduated their first 50-50 male-female class. And so to your point, in speaking directly to what is the outcome that you are trying to achieve as a student, and just shifting the language even slightly to be really focused on what you can get out of this, I think can also make an enormous difference.
Thank you. Alan?
So one of the things that was talked about earlier around housing counseling and one of the things that we talked about around housing counseling as it relates to HBCU grads, for those who are, and I heard something about top 3. I was going to debate that later, but I digress. But for folks in the HBCU world, one of the things that company comes to mind, Home Depot, they do this retool your campus effort every year. So it's a big competitive endeavor by all HBCUs to have these, to get the funding from Home Depot to build out a park or in addition to the set or whatever the quad is. And so, I'm sitting here thinking, why would maybe say, for example, obviously we're here with IBM, have a opportunity. Since COVID, we've all kind of rethought how we deliver education. And so if we're talking about how do we educate our HBCU grads as they're getting ready to come out, it's, partnering with our HBCUs to say, look, we're going to give this course that, is free, but all HBCU students in the HBCU that has the most number of students that complete this, home buyer counseling course that's approved by HUD in partnership with HUD or whoever the entity is, the largest number per capita, what have you, because obviously you got some HBCUs that are larger than others, but of the graduating class or the university will get X amount of funding toward, whatever that is, right? But I think that's a great way to utilize how we learn now since COVID is happening. We had online learning before that, but now it's obviously we've done it on steroids since COVID has taken place. To use that service delivery, combine it with the competitive spirit of all HBCUs, to then have an end goal of trying to increase the number of educated HBCU students coming out, and then maybe even take that same model and use it for the alumni, or maybe young alumni, because hopefully the older alumni are a little bit more seasoned, but take that model and use it both for HBCU students, but also within maybe a certain years after graduating from HBCUs, do that cohort as well. And I think that's a way that we could probably advance this conversation around education for ownership a lot quicker.
I'm gonna put that right there. And actually, just to that point, I do want to throw out here.
And I think IBM said they would.
They built
I think they said $1 million to the top. $1 million to the top by HBCU. You may not have paid.
We want to put money in the wallet. Are there any programs that we are talking about that we can put money in this digital wallet to help us?
So I will throw out there, there are 2 programs. So IBM has $100 million commitment to HBCUs. So 4 HBCUs, I think so far, they built quantum computing labs.
I don't know them off the top of my head, but we can look those up. And then same with cybersecurity, to make sure that people are graduating with degrees that will work.
What was the other one?
So there's the cyber and quantum.
And there are two financial literacy programs that I do know that are culturally relevant. One, Robert Smith is leading. And the second one, I'm a strategist for the American College of Financial Services. And so they have one called Know Your Wealth, Grow Your Wealth. And that activity is aimed about 17 historically Black colleges. The gamification works, but I do think it needs to be connected to an outcome to really motivate to be able to move forward. But I definitely know George Nichols, first African American president of American College after 93 years, would definitely be interested in seeing how they collaborate.
Love it, love it. Brian, are you able to walk us through how Home Lending Pal FinTech could potentially be a digital delivery channel where all of this could be packaged and delivered to the students?
Sure. And I'd like to just set this up because this is important because these fintechs led by gentlemen like this, these fintechs are leading us into the future. And our ability to identify and help scale these types of initiatives and these types of entrepreneurs is critical to the success of our programs.
Thank you. Shout out Brian EMT. So yes, my name is Brian Young. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Home Lending Pal. You all don't know me yet, but you will. The reason that I say that is that as of tomorrow, IBM is going to announce that they are going to back what we are building with the technical resources that we need to build it faster. So what are we building? Home Lending Pal in its simplest form is a marketplace. It is a place for people of color, like us, to go out and determine what homeownership looks like through data democratization. To do that, we're utilizing artificial intelligence, blockchain, and gamification to give these users a reason to go out and explore homeownership. Now, most of you are very well seasoned like myself, but I do have a younger brother, and I know that everything that he does is from his cell phone. So all the cool things, all the cool programs that we're talking about, unfortunately, that doesn't work for millennials and Generation Z. Trying to get a kid to sit in a room for 10 hours or 12 hours is damn near impossible, unfortunately. Excuse my language. So what we are doing is basically taking your programs and digitizing them, allowing these users to connect their online bank account. So if they have Cash App, Venmo, or anything like that, they're connecting that program. And then we're utilizing elements of data uncertainty. So I actually went directly to FICO and built a partnership with them to be able to democratize their data to consumers without forcing them to originate a loan. So what does that mean? We then go to lenders and we get their underwriting guidelines, and our system is able to pair them to programs that are meant to help the minority community. And we're doing this, and we're leveraging. I heard one of the comments mentioned before is that oftentimes you have these people that are putting in months worth of work, and we all know that buying a home is not simple, it's not easy, it's complex, it takes months at a time. But the ability to leverage blockchain gives us the ability to not only track this individual, but it gives us a beautiful ledger. I'm pretty sure everyone in this room is familiar with the HOME Act, the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act of 1975. Unfortunately, that was created in 1975, and it is only updated once a year. And unfortunately, that is a 20th century policy that is trying to manage 21st century technology. But I would actually even challenge you all. One of the things that we did with our platform is we actually went to the CFPB. Last year was one of the best years to buy homes, and no one in this room can argue that. However, the number of lenders that reported their home information decreased by 18%. So the CFPB put in a policy that allowed lenders to go from reporting 25 closed loans to 100 closed loans. And what do we see? Less reporting. But you may also not know that the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act is actually a voluntary act that lenders do not have to report. And when they report it, they have the ability to edit the data when they decide to send it to the CFPB. So it is like a self-regulated test where I'm regulating my own test. And as long as I can stay within the lines, I will never get in trouble. Well, what does blockchain allow us to do? It gives us an immutable ledger to see the original information that was there and understand how they're changing that. But more importantly, what we're building in essence is what is known as digital engineering or a digital twin. It allows us to simulate these different information, different items with real-time data to inform the consumer of what their options are. When they are ready to go through the process, blockchain allows us to anonymize their data in smart contracts until after the decision is made. So then once that decision is made, then we release the home information that we can see how users are being treated fairly in the process. Even organizations like NACA can use what we're doing, because at the end of the day, your programs are just a database. It is a checkbox, a guideline that a user fits within. So allowing that user to be able to say, hey, you can fit within this guideline, reach out to this organization and try to understand more is the ultimate goal of yourself. Go ahead. I love this. Go ahead.
It's interesting because.
I think I did meet you and we talked about blockchain 2 weeks ago, blockchain bank. So yes, I definitely agree 100%.
Right next to you.
Yeah. For me, I think I'm just talking about the HBCU students. We need to establish a communication platform with them. So we cannot assume what they need. They have to tell us what they need. So we can work hard for them in terms of educating the investor, educating financial institution, the government, HUD, GNMA, FHFA. This communication platform doesn't exist. So we need to create that. And also, when the students are graduating, the only burden they think about is the student loan. And that's all. Now we're going to come and say, oh, by the way, we need to buy a house, and that's not that. So we need to find innovative way to manage student loan with the housing mortgage. So that we need to find a way to do it. That's something that can originate from the government, from HUD, GNMA, Freddie and Fannie. We need to start thinking aggressively to help the students. We cannot just assume that when we graduate, they're going to buy a house, because they might be burdened with the student loan that they don't want to see any debt, and they might not even have credit card. So this is something definitely we need to put in our radar. Now, the counseling that I've mentioned, very important. The education is important, but this certificate of counseling education needs to have some kind of motivation, a monetary motivation, that the students will look forward to achieving that, because it's going to help them in a mortgage and buy a house. This doesn't exist. It was something similar to what I believe the Obama administration did in terms of the first home buyer program. So for me, that was a success, because I have experienced it myself with my relatives who was homeless. So we don't need to do any data analytics. It worked. Folks went and got that money and helped them. We need to do the same thing for the HBCU students. We need to allow them, when they graduate, to have some kind of financial support, not just PowerPoint presentation, financial support to go and get a house, and also marry the two debt, so they don't have to look at two debt. Look at one debt. So this is something that definitely is on the radar, and I look forward to hearing more comments.
So if I can respond to one thing. So I think we have to be, so I think we have to be a bit careful when we're talking about advanced technology. Because yes, with what we do, we can grab the bank data, Finicity and all that, you grab the data, you can do all that analysis. But if we talk about financial management, we found that even though we can make it a very streamlined process, so without the home buyer doing anything, they would know what, all the transactions, they would know the beginning and ending balance, they'd have all that stuff without them doing anything, using AI. We found it more beneficial for the home buyer to scan in or upload their bank statements. So they're actually reviewing that, and they're transposing that data into the system. So they're being educated by themselves by saying, might be the first time they're looking at their bank statements, might be the first time they're looking at their transactions. So yes, we use AI, but we back off of it a bit to say, if we're about financial education, have the home buyer doing a lot of it themselves so they can educate themselves and say, oh, I hadn't looked at my bank statement in a long time. I didn't realize that all these transactions. I didn't upload the pay stub, the W-2, the tax return, and they're transposing their data into the system and educating themselves during that process. And by them doing that, then they can sit with a counselor who can focus on financial management, which is basically reviewing the budget and educating them of where the budget is and a goal budget of what you need to achieve home ownership. And then the most important thing is mortgage payment, mortgage payment, mortgage payment. That's the most important thing, and that has to be fixed. So if you fix the mortgage payment, this is what you can afford, because interest rates go up and down during the process, housing prices go up and down during the process. You've got to have a fixed mortgage payment. But I would just be a little concerned about being so pushing the AI and getting all that data, which is accessible. It's not difficult to do. But are you really doing financial education, financial management for the home buyer by making it that streamlined and easy process?
And I think this is a great conversation that we are unfortunately a minute over. We want to thank you all for your time, for your content, your support. Thank you. So I know that there are other comments, and I really hate to stop the conversation here, but you know, we can actually continue. If you folks want to talk a little bit more afterwards, we can certainly do that. But I'm going to turn it over now to Jean to close us out and give us a call to action.
Yeah, so this has been an amazing day, and I want to start by thanking our host, IBM. Our organizing committee, Andrea, you, Stacy, everyone else has done an incredible job. But most of all, we'd like to thank each of you, our panelists and our participants, because without you, we're not going to solve anything. And our goal here is to be actionable. So coming out of this, we've had a lot of dialogue, and we can see that there are a lot of very talented people that have a lot of different opinions. Doesn't make one wrong or one right. What we need to do is figure out what the best is and move. We're not afraid of being able to launch something, test, and then scale. But we're not going to spend time talking about this for the next year, 2 to 3 years. Again, Secretary, you mentioned that we've got a unique window. Whenever have you seen 3 women of color that are the most powerful people in real estate, which is the largest industry in America? You know, this is a unique window for us. And it's up to us. It's not their responsibility, it's our responsibility. So again, thank everyone for being here. You've all been spectacular. And we're going to reach out to each and every one of you to ask for continued follow-up and participation. This is just the beginning of the journey. Thank you so much for being here.
All right, feel free, we're not broken. Feel free, if you have any other thoughts, put them on the sticky, on the board on the way out, and we captured everything as well.
She doesn't.